This podcast is sponsored by ebookit.com, self-publishing solutions for the independent author and small press. Visit us today at ebookit.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Toastmasters podcast, the official podcast of Toastmasters International. Hello, everybody. My name is Bo Bennett.
And I'm Ryan Levesque.
And we're back for another interview. Ryan, who do we got today?
We are going to be speaking today with Dr. Pauline Wallin. She's a psychologist in central Pennsylvania. She's the author of the self-help book, Taming Your Inner Brat, a guide for transforming self-defeating behavior, and she writes about how to apply psychology to everyday life. Dr. Wallin wrote an article in the March 2016 issue of the Toastmaster magazine. The title is Kick a Bad Habit, and of course that is what we were going to be talking about today. Habits, forming good habits and getting rid of bad ones. Dr. Pauline Wallin, welcome to the Toastmasters podcast.
Welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So, Dr. Wallin, to start us off today, I'd like to go a little Socratic. What I mean by that is Socrates, as I'm sure you know, always liked to start by defining the terms. And of course, we're talking about habits today. So what is a habit?
Well, a habit is simply a learned pattern of behavior. And through repetition, it becomes ingrained in we don't even think about it. And habits, we can form habits at any time in our lives.
And how are they formed?
If habits are formed through repetition of behavior patterns, and that we get rewarded in some degree. There's some satisfaction or some sense of completion. So habits aren't necessarily good or bad. The area of the brain that automates our behavior to make a habit doesn't really differentiate. So let's say a habit of tying your shoelaces is a good habit because you don't have to think about it each time you do it. But if you get into the habit of checking your phone every couple of minutes, that's something that you might want to change.
So what is that point of delineation? In common parlance, we talk about good habits and bad habits. In what sense is a habit good or bad? And could a habit be good for someone but bad for someone else?
Well, let's start with the first one. The good and bad part is whether a habit is adaptive or maladaptive, if it helps us or hurts us. So I guess what might be adaptive for one person might not be adaptive for another person. So let's say you are in the habit of checking your phone every few seconds. If you're supposed to be working on something else, that's not so good. But if you are waiting to hear, let's say from the hospital about the status of a relative that was just admitted, so that's adaptive at that moment because you're ready to take action when you get whatever the text is or the phone call.
I'm just thinking of another example here. Something like, for example, controlling your portion size when you're eating, right? Or maybe exercising regularly. Those sound like good habits, but this is now, of course, getting into the area of other medical issues and psychological disorders, but people can take those to extremes
sure.
Where we end up with eating disorders and, body image issues that are influencing.
Right. So if somebody is running 5 miles a day and is so used to running 5 miles a day that you feel compelled to do that all the time, and your family is waiting for you, but you got to get your 5 miles in, that's not such an adaptive habit. That habit can work against you.
Yeah. Sure. I know a lot of people who have taken exercise to the extreme. They look great. They're in great shape, but yet they have no social life. I think there's always a balance. And I think the key point here is just when we look at what's bad or good, the evaluations we make, we just have to realize that it's subjective and it's dependent on each person's situation, correct?
Correct.
So let's talk about if we've identified a habit in our life that is maladaptive, whatever it may happen to be. What are some good first steps to start putting together a plan to address and change that habit or replace it with a better habit?
Right. Well, you bring up a good point about replacing a habit with a better habit because there's so many magazine articles and other literature saying how to break a habit. A habit is
Mm.
never really broken. That behavior stays in your brain. And sometimes you revert to old habits under stress. So really you are retraining yourself. And if you think of habit change as retraining a new behavior for an old behavior, then it becomes more, I guess, it becomes more logical thing to do.
Mm. Well, I'll give you an example. One of the worst habits that I had was drinking soda. I used to drink tons and tons of soda. I grew up on soda, and that's what my parents gave me. I think I was nursed on soda, actually. But so I drank regular soda for a long time, and then it was in my early 20s when I decided to go with diet soda. And I remember it was the worst taste ever, and it was just horrible, but I wanted to do away with those calories. So I moved to diet soda, and it took me about maybe 2 weeks of drinking that, and then I couldn't go back to regular soda. But it was a few years after that I switched to water. So what I did is I replaced the soda with the water. I had the same like physical habit of picking up something and drinking it when I was thirsty and when I was eating. So the same behavior, but just with something different. Because of that substitution, it was a lot easier to hold on to. And to this day, it's been well over, I don't know, like 15 years now, and I only drink water. I don't drink soda anymore. So
Great.
It worked.
Yes.
Good for me.
Sorry, I just had a great example, but I don't think it's appropriate to share on the show. I really wanted to say it.
I really want to know what it is now. Okay,
no,
share it with us.
It's gonna sound bad. It's gonna make it sound like I'm an alcoholic or something. But like, sometimes at the end of the day, I like to have a glass of wine with dinner.
Right.
And obviously, I don't want to get into the habit of doing that so much that it becomes maladaptive. Right. So what I'll do if I feel like, geez, I really like a glass of wine, and not even just about getting addicted to alcohol, but just the calories too, as I'm working on managing my weight. But what I'll do is I'll take a wine glass and I'll fill it with like sparkling water,
right?
Maybe with a little bit of lime or something in there, and so I still feel like I'm getting kind of, I don't know, an elevated beverage in a sense.
Well, yeah, you're getting the experience of the ritual of relaxing with a glass of something.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That doesn't make you sound like an alcoholic at all.
Well, I wasn't sure.
No, but you bring up an important point that once you develop a habit, it feels weird not to do it.
Mm.
When you want to change your behavior, it just feels like very weird. So if you came home and didn't have a glass of something, you'd be kind of wandering around looking for something to do, or you'd feel uncomfortable.
Right. Mm. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: as a clinical psychologist, you would have this answer. What is really the difference, or as Ryan used before, the delineation between just like a bad habit, and I'm taking this a step further, going to some kind of clinical diagnosis, something that you would find in the DSM?
Do you mean like an obsessive compulsive?
Yeah, like either
right. It's that how compelled you feel and how uncomfortable you are and how you obsess over it. So if you get into the habit of, washing your hands or rearranging things, and like I had one client who had a ritual in the morning where things had to be in a certain order, and if she mixed up the order, she had to start over again, and then she was late for work. So it's a matter of degree. In fact, most psychiatric diagnoses are just normal behavior in extreme.
That makes sense.
Dr. Wallin, I want to ask you about a particularly insidious habit. And one that we find a lot of Toastmasters struggling with, a lot of people, in fact, who come into Toastmasters to try to conquer this, and that is the often unconscious inclusion of ums and ahs and crutch words in their speech. Something that I'm guilty of myself quite often. Geesh, there it is.
You're guilty?
Why does every time someone tries to talk about ums and ahs, well, I'm talking about myself, I'm always including them when I talk about it. Anyway, so the question is, something like that is, you do it all the time without even realizing it. How do you even begin to tackle a habit like that?
You begin by practicing and training yourself to stay silent instead of saying ums and ahs. And now the new one is so. I don't know if you heard this, but every time I turn on NPR and they're interviewing somebody and the person starts with so and to get through, well, see, I'm doing it too. So
No,
yeah.
I noticed that too over the past few years, and I've mentioned this to a few people, and they looked at me like I'm crazy. But I say, I always hear in interviews, people say, well, tell me about how you started the company. So it was back in 2010. I know exactly.
Oh, so
what
it
you're
wasn't
saying.
it wasn't like a pause, like so, because I think that's different than a so it was back in 2010,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it's starting every story or anecdote with so. Is that the one you're referring to, or do you mean it as a connector word between?
Well, starting every anecdote, it's just a speech habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any speech habit, you can at least retrain yourself to speak, and the more practiced you are, the more fluent you are, and you don't have to hesitate and say so much.
Cool.
And Obama always uses the and. Do you ever notice that?
Yeah.
That's a very common speech pattern for him.
Right. Yeah, something I hear from Toastmasters all the time, and I think this is partially a key, new Toastmasters in particular. As you may know, Dr. Wallin, we have in our Toastmasters clubs a role called the ah counter. And the ah counter will count the ahs and ums of each of the speakers throughout the meeting, and then at the end of the meeting give a report on how we did in that regard. And new Toastmasters are often saying, I hear ahs and ums all the time now.
Right.
I turn on the TV, I go to work, talking with my coworkers, on the phone with someone. All I'm hearing is ahs and ums. And I think there's something about that initial awareness that then helps us to notice it in our own speech and then begin to make some changes. Do you agree?
I sort of agree. And then I just said it. Every time you get a haircut, don't you notice other people's hair for a day or two?
Yes. That's what is that called?
The frequency illusion.
I'm gonna try to. Man, I just can't measure up with these two psychologists here. But I'm gonna say that is a function of the RAS, the reticular activating system in the brain. Am I not right? Do I get 50 bonus points for that?
I'm not sure what it's a function of, but we pay attention to what is most relevant in our lives. So if somebody is counting your ums and ahs and you are self-conscious about it, you're dedicating a great part of your thoughts to it. As I say, like I talk about waking up with $1 worth of energy. So if you're very self-conscious about your ahs, maybe you're spending 50 cents of your day's worth of energy on that, then you will notice it in other people.
Right. You're bringing up another topic here with the budget of energy, and I think in your article when you talk about that, you were getting into the concept of willpower. I'm a fan of Kelly McGonigal's work, The Willpower Instinct. It was Bo introduced me to that book and to her work. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the dynamic of willpower and how that factors in when we're looking at changing habits.
Well, willpower requires a lot of effort. You have to pay attention. You have to be mindful of what you're doing. And then you become uncomfortable and you have to overcome that discomfort or else deal with it in some way. And I'm not that familiar with Kelly McGonigal's work, although I've seen some videos of her. I am more familiar with the work of Roy Baumeister. But in any case, the general theory is that willpower depletes energy. It takes a lot of effort and energy. And when you're exercising willpower, you get drained. If you notice when most crimes are committed, when people fall off the wagon, fall off their diets, it's in the evening because their willpower is depleted.
Right.
It's a concept known as ego depletion.
Yeah, and then but the more you practice, it's like weight training. You have like training your physical muscles, you're training your mental muscles, and you kind of get used to it. and it's less effort each time.
But okay, but like weight training, we need periods of working that muscle and then periods of recovery, right? Otherwise,
Right.
we just burn out and
Right. And
crash.
so sleep gives you that recovery period, and then you're ready the next day.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I highlighted that in your article. Don't skimp on sleep. I'm a big believer in sleep. I love my 8 hours and I protect them jealously. Not sure what that had to do with anything, but I feel better just for having said it.
That's what it's all about.
It's all about me, ultimately. So, Pauline, I'm going to ask you to do something that's a little bit unfair, and that is to give some counsel to a patient who's not even here with us. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's a man that I recently met. He's in his 50s. He has a very physical job I'll just say in the construction industry. Excellent at what he does. He's never really had to interact with people, but he's known for several years now that that's holding back his career and that he could be taking other opportunities as a foreman or whatever it might be. And again, he's being held back for it. I was just chatting with him recently, and he said he's known for 9 years that he needed to join Toastmasters, and that would help him get to the next level. I mentioned his icebreaker speech to him, which is the very first speech every new member gives when they join Toastmasters. And he said, my icebreaker was just walking in to the building to come to this meeting. That's how difficult it was for him. But actually, he has already given his icebreaker speech, and I keep praising him because and you sort of talk about this in your article, he's leaning into that discomfort and doing what he can to take charge. But what words of encouragement from a psychologist like yourself might you have for someone in that position who has this almost debilitating fear of speaking, but really just wants to improve and get over that fear?
Well, first, as you know, fear of public speaking is way up there on what creates anxiety in people. And the fear comes a lot from being very self-conscious, assuming that everybody is looking at you critically and everybody is waiting for you to make a mistake and that this is trial by fire. And actually, the Toastmasters audience wants you to succeed. They don't want to see you fail. They want to share your success. So they probably are not looking at you critically. They're your friends.
So reframing is what we're talking about, right?
That's right.
Look at me. I am hanging with you guys.
You're right there with us. Well.
I'm the armchair psychologist.
And that's called...
practicing without a license.
Yeah. I love it. Oh, man.
Get arrested for that.
Cool. What else we got, Bo?
Oh, I was going to say that I have this friend. He's a host of a podcast. He's got this big problem, and forget about it. We'll get to him later.
It's a messianic complex. Oh boy. One of your strategies here is distracting yourself for 15 minutes. Can you talk about how to use that, when to use that, and what benefit?
Yes, I call that 15 magic minutes. If you commit yourself to doing something different for 15 minutes, and most anybody can do that, you're giving yourself permission to wait. And usually during that 15 minutes, any anxiety you have or any compulsion you have to keep doing what you were doing or to, resisting breaking your habit, it usually subsides. The first, I found that in my work with people clinically in my office, for example, that they procrastinate a lot. So we say, just commit to doing something for 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, the anxiety of procrastination actually is reduced so that you, at the end of 15 minutes, I say you can decide to continue, or if you decide not to continue, at least you've got 15 minutes of work done.
Mm.
And usually people decide to continue.
Yeah, I've used a similar strategy, but I call it the magic 5 minutes. Actually, I just named it that now. But
that's copyrighted. You can't.
Yeah, but seriously, sometimes if I know I need to exercise, but I'm just not feeling it, I'll say, all right, let me put on my gym clothes and I will start, go out for a run, and I will run. I'll set a timer for 5 minutes. When
Right.
the 5 minutes is done, if I want to come back into the house, to the warmth, and resume what I was doing beforehand, I will give myself
pick
that
up those
permission.
donuts again.
Right. But inevitably, I get out there 5 minutes, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I got this.
Those first few minutes are the hardest. And when I was able to run, I used to argue with myself. And I said, look, you could be like a half a mile down the road already instead of trying to decide whether to go or not.
Right. Dr. Wallin, I want to ask you, as a clinician, I guess would be the term, right? You're seeing patients regularly with lots of different degrees of conditions that they're seeking your help for, and part of that, I'm sure, has to do with changing habits. My question is, how much can or do people really change? I mean, do most people end up making the change that they want to make, or is that an anomaly if someone actually, forms the new habit that they want to form?
Well, if you look at the disappointing results of weight loss attempts, which is in the 5 to 10% for permanent weight loss, it's very discouraging. People do often have an intention to change, and it always seems easier when it's in the future, but when we have to deal with the nitty-gritty and dealing with our resistance and dealing with our urges and dealing with all our rationalizations, it becomes quite difficult. So in order to change a habit, it has to be more internally motivated. Like if you want to lose weight, it has to be more that you want to be healthy rather than you want to look good at your class reunion.
That it's interesting. That actually resonates with me because, as Bo knows, I had lost about 70 pounds.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I put some of it back on, but I'm working on that. But my initial motivation actually was because I had been reading about the mental benefits of exercise. And I just got so excited about that I wanted that for myself, to be able to handle stress better, to be able to learn better. I mean, there's so much research about all the great benefits of exercise to your brain.
And even more benefit if you go outside rather than in the gym.
Yeah.
Being in nature makes your mind more flexible and creative.
Right. So yeah, I think it was that internal motivation that I just looking better wasn't enough for me, but but helping my brain, that was enough. And then as a result, I lost the weight and adopted a healthier lifestyle.
There's a whole book called Spark. That's the name of the book. Yeah.
Yep.
By John Reddy, MD, I think.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book. It talks about the cognitive benefits of exercise and how important they are. But one little a cautionary note: if you're constantly starving and constantly hungry, then it's very difficult to focus on what you need to do. So sometimes those benefits of exercising and getting in shape could be offset by some of the pain and discomfort that you're actually feeling in the process. But I think once you're there, and you start eating normally again and to try to maintain a good weight, then you'll be in good shape.
Right. Well, this has been definitely enlightening. You have been a fantastic guest, Dr. Wallin. I'd like to ask you if you can share with our listeners where they can go to learn more about you, maybe where they can find your book.
I have a lot of articles online, so if they just Google me, Pauline Wallin, Wallin, they can see a lot of the stuff that I've written.
Great.
Cool. And what more would people learn by reading your book in addition to what we talked about today?
Well, the inner brat is the part of you that wants what it wants, when it wants it, and doesn't care who or what is destroyed in the process. And it's what is behind so many of our self-defeating behaviors. And once you understand your inner brat, which clinically is a combination of impulsivity and narcissism, you can make changes in how you think and how you behave for a more satisfying life and better relationships.
Nice.
Very good.
Sounds like something everybody needs.
Especially you, Bo. Your inner brat is particularly nasty.
It's an outer brat. That's why.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Wallin. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bo and Ryan. Bye-bye.
Isn't it about time you published that book you've been thinking about? We can help with that. At ebookit.com, we've been providing authors and small presses with ebook publishing services since 2010. Visit us today at ebookit.com and let us know how we can help you.